Well, hello. Welcome to God, Guns, and Dogs. I'm Steffi B., your host today. I'm glad you could join me. I'm going to talk today a little bit about immigration. There's a quiet unraveling happening, and the most dangerous part is how ordinary it feels sometimes. No explosions, no dramatic collapse, just a slow erosion of trust, identity, of shared purpose, the kind of decline that doesn't announce itself with sirens, but with silence, with confusion, with people looking at one another and they no longer recognize the same country. The nation doesn't fall apart all at once. It frays. It frays when the idea of citizenship becomes optional instead of meaningful. When crossing a border no longer carries any expectation of joining a culture, but instead becomes an entry point into a system that no longer asks anything of you, not allegiance, not participation, not even acknowledgement of the values that built it. Immigration, in its best form, is one of the greatest strengths the country can have. It brings energy, ambition, and renewal. But that only works when it's anchored in something, and when there is a clear expectation that becoming a part of a nation means something deeper than just being physically present. Because without that anchor, immigration stops being immigration. It becomes fragmentation. And fragmentation is where the damage begins. With millions of people arrive without a shared understanding of our laws, the language, the cultural norms, or even basic commitment to our country itself. You don't get diversity, you get division. You get parallel societies forming side by side, each with its own rules, its own loyalties, its own sense of right and wrong. And eventually, those worlds stop talking to each other. Trust erodes first. You see it in small ways, people less willing to help strangers, less willing to assume good intent, communities that used to feel connected now feel cautious, guarded. Everyone feels a little more isolated, a little more suspicious, because we don't trust. Because trust doesn't survive in a society where people no longer believe that they're playing by the same rules. And then comes the deeper loss, the loss of shared identity. There was a time when schools didn't just teach math and reading. They reinforced a sense of belonging. There was a time when schools didn't just teach math and reading. They reinforced a sense of belonging, a pledge of allegiance. The Pledge of Allegiance wasn't about blind obedience. It was about reminding each generation that they were part of something larger than themselves, a common thread, a shared story. Take that away, and what replaces it? Nothing. Or worse, confusion. If a child grows up never being told what their country stands for, never being asked to value it, never being taught its principles, why would they feel any responsibility to protect it? You can't expect loyalty where you've refused to teach any meaning. And when that vacuum spreads across generations, you end up with a population that is physically present but emotionally detached. A country full of people who live in the same place but don't share the same purpose. That's not a nation. That's a location. And while all of this is happening at the cultural level, something even more corrosive is happening at the top. A government that no longer inspires confidence. When people look at their leaders and see inconsistency, dishonesty, self-interest above public service, the damage multiplies. Because now it's not just that people don't trust each other, they don't trust the system itself that they live under. Laws begin to feel optional. Ethics feel negotiable. Accountability disappears into talking points in press conferences. And once that happens, people, something fundamental breaks. Because a functioning society depends on the belief that the rules matter, that they apply to everyone, and that they are enforced fairly. Without that, people stop following the rules. Not out of rebellion, but out of logic. Why play by a system that doesn't even play fair? And that's how moral decay sets in. Not as a dramatic shift, but as a series of rational decisions made by individuals who no longer believe the system deserves their trust. So where does that leave us? A country with weakened borders, fractured identity, declining trust, and a government many people no longer believe in. That's not just a political problem that we've got going on, people. That's a civilizational one. But here's the part that matters most, and it's not irreversible. Decline is a process, and so is recovery. The question is whether things can change. It's whether citizens are willing to take the responsibility for that change, because waiting for leaders to fix it is part of what created the problem in the first place. Real change doesn't start in Washington, D.C. It starts in the living rooms of you and me, in communities, in the way people choose to engage or not to engage with the country that they live in. It starts with something simple but powerful: expectation. A nation has the right to expect something from the people who live in it, not perfection, but participation, not uniformity, but unity around core principles. That means reestablishing the idea that citizenship matters, that becoming part of a country involves more than just arrival. It involves commitment, learning the language, understanding our laws, respecting the culture even if you bring your own traditions with you. Integration does not mean erasing identity. It means adding to a shared one. And that shared identity needs to be taught again, clearly and unapologetically. It needs to be taught in schools, in communities, in public life, not as propaganda, but as a foundation. Because if our country can't explain what it stands for, it can't expect anyone to stand for it. At the same time, accountability has to return to the government, not through slogans, but through pressure. Citizens have more influence than they think. We do. But it requires engagement, voting consistently, not just in presidential elections, but locally, where many of the most impactful decisions are made. Paying attention to policies, not just personalities. Demanding transparency and not accepting vague answers like we have been getting. And perhaps the most important, refusing to normalize behavior that undermines our trust. Because every time dishonesty or corruption is shrugged off as just politics, it lowers the standard a little bit further. And over time, those lowered standards become the new normal. And rebuilding a country isn't just about system and policies. It's about culture, our culture, the American culture. It's about everyday behavior, choosing to engage with neighbors instead of withdrawing, choosing to have difficult conversations instead of avoiding them, choosing to model the kind of and responsibility that people want to see at a national level. Because culture doesn't come from the top down. It grows from the bottom up. And if enough individuals start acting with intention, it creates a ripple effect that no policy alone can replicate. This isn't about returning to some idealized past. It's about recognizing that a country only works when its people believe in it and are willing to contribute to it. That belief doesn't happen automatically. It has to be built, maintained, defended, and right now in many ways it's been neglected severely. But neglect can be corrected. The trust, it can be rebuilt. Identity can be redefined, not by excluding people, but by clearly defining what it means to belong in America. And government can be held accountable, not by hoping it changes, but by insisting on it. The situation is so serious, people, but it's not hopeless yet. What would make it hopeless is apathy. The idea that nothing can be done, so nothing should be done. That's the real danger, because a country doesn't collapse when it faces challenges. It collapses when its people stop caring about those challenges. So the question isn't whether the problems exist. They do. The question is whether citizens are willing to step into the responsibility of addressing them, not perfectly, not all at once, but consistently. Because in the end, a nation is nothing more and nothing less than the people who make it up. And if those people decide to rebuild trust, reinforce shared values, and demand better from themselves and from their leaders, then even a country that feels like it's unraveling can begin to come back together. Thread by thread, little by little, we can do this. But these people in our government have to be held accountable. Come the midterms, we have got to get a majority in the Senate and in the House. We won't need any Democrats or any rhinos. We'll have enough Republicans to vote common sense laws into our laws, amend any constitutional amendments that need to be done without any riffraff and any bullcrap from these retarded Democrats that desire nothing but communism, socialism, and money and power. That's all they want. They want our money and they want power. That they care nothing else about us. They were not taught. The last couple generations in school have been taught not to love this country, so we're kind of screwed. It's going to take a lot of work for us to find qualified candidates, but we've got to do the groundwork. You've got to do a background check and see how they voted, because the Democrats are going to be lying and running as Republicans to get voted in, and then they're going to turn straight commie the second they get in, just like Spanberger did in Virginia, that nasty commie spook. I cannot stand that lady. Well, you guys, I appreciate you coming to hear my monologue on today's God, Guns, and Dogs. Remember, no matter what life throws at you, you still have potential. God bless you. And of course, God bless America.